Welcome to the first episode of Chris-Leef TableTalk Conversations. My name is Michelle Riedel. I am the Professional Lines Manager, and alongside with me today is Kimberly Sparks, our Senior Broker. One of the things we love most about our job is helping agents understand the caveats of different professional lines products to help them better serve their clients. So throughout our series, we are going to take a look at different professional line coverages and discuss important information and trends that we're seeing in today's marketplace. In today's discussion, we're going to explore employment practice liability and the challenges employers face in today's environment, with challenges we encounter when selling the product. So Kim, we know EPLI is an important coverage for businesses to have, but why is EPLI becoming so critical for small businesses today?
Well, Michelle, EPL lawsuits within the last 2 decades have increased by 400%. And 41% of EPL claims actually involve businesses with less than 100 employees. So currently, industry professionals say the average cost of an EPL claim is usually between $50,000 to $70,000, which could be absolutely catastrophic for a small business without an EPL policy in place.
Yeah, often we hear that businesses think that they are too small to be sued.
Totally not true. Business with even 2 or 3 employees can face a lawsuit from any type of allegation. Even if the allegations are frivolous, they're going to have to defend themselves against that lawsuit. And if they don't have an EPL policy in place, they will be paying those costs out of pocket. Whereas typically a larger company will have a dedicated HR department who are formally trained and have the expertise in employment law to help protect them from claims. A small company may only have an owner or a supervisor who's handling HR matters with no formal training or maybe even no skill set to manage employees appropriately.
And those defense costs can be quite extensive. Aside from defense, are there any other costs that the small businesses might encounter?
Yeah, sure. So in addition to those amounts that I mentioned earlier, that doesn't even take in consideration the non-monetary costs to a small business, including loss of time, focusing on your business while you're dealing with a legal matter, the employee morale of your company, especially a small business when everybody knows what's going on, and even the possible reputational harm they could face if the issue gets on social media or makes the news.
Yeah, those are definitely challenges today. Can you talk a little bit more about how EPLI matters are resolved?
Sure. In most cases, EPL claims are settled as quickly as possible and preferably out of court. Court cases can drag on for years and years, and so do the defense costs. To pay the attorney, to pay for the investigation, depositions, and the subpoenas. Carriers know lawsuits that go to jury trial, those verdicts tend to favor the plaintiff with significantly higher payouts. Juries just tend to be more sympathetic, especially in cases of sexual harassment and discrimination.
Yeah, that's interesting. So besides the financial and reputational exposure that businesses might face, are there any challenges or trends that businesses are facing today that they didn't, say, 20 years ago?
It just seems like the world is rapidly changing and becoming more politically divisive, and people now have what I like to say, big feelings. Movements such as Me Too and Time's Up have really encouraged women and men to speak up more about alleged sexual harassment. It's still important that employers take every complaint seriously, but it's also just as important for them not to take a side or rush to judgment. All these changes are forcing employers to be more engaged, more sensitive, and reactive in how they manage their employees today.
Yeah, so given all of those challenges, have you heard of any litigation in the past year or two that maybe have not made case law yet?
Sure, we are actually seeing more litigation involving gender identity and sexual orientation that are just now working their way through the courts. And many folks are waiting to see what new laws, if any, will come of these cases. So stand by on that one.
Yeah, it will definitely be interesting to see what case law does come from that. Those are great points. Does that create a challenge for employers today?
Absolutely. Managing employees in this new environment can be really tricky. Traditionally, EPL carriers have been well versed in dealing with discrimination claims based on disability, religion, age, or race, but now there's a new twist on it. For example, what if you have an employee that refuses to refer to a coworker in their preferred pronoun because of their personal religious beliefs? While, on the other hand, your trans employee feels that they are being discriminated against if they're not being referred to in their preferred identity. What does an employer do? How do you deal with this? Which employees' rights are more important? Or who should be protected in this type of a situation? It's really perplexing. Another example is, what if an older employee uses a word or a phrase that was acceptable at one time, but now a younger employee finds that offensive? Employers are also dealing with all kinds of different things, such as reverse gender roles, such as men wanting to take paternity leave, which traditionally has always been a woman's issue. And of course, post-pandemic employees want accommodations to work from home now, where employees want them back in the office.
Kim, we've talked a little bit about the challenges that small businesses face today, but let's take a different approach. Let's talk about nonprofit organizations. How are nonprofit organizations different than small businesses? Do they face the same challenges?
Yes, nonprofits really have the same challenges as a for-profit small business, but without paid employees. Most nonprofits have volunteer workers. What I've seen is agents sometimes miss an opportunity to sell EPL to a nonprofit organization when they really need that coverage.
Okay, so why would a nonprofit need EPLI if they don't have any employees?
Well, many agents don't realize that on a nonprofit EPL D&O policy, that volunteers are actually covered under the definition of an insured or in the definition of an employee. Volunteer workers can and will still sue a nonprofit just like a paid employee for the very same reasons as we discussed earlier. Volunteers can and are sexually harassed or feel discriminated against while working at nonprofits. Volunteers are also notorious for causing third-party EPL claims, which is another great reason to offer this coverage to nonprofits.
Interesting. So can you think of an example for a nonprofit where they had a third-party claim?
We had one that involved a male vendor who routinely came to a nonprofit office to deliver packages and was often met by an older but flirtatious volunteer who worked there. Over a period of several months, every time that vendor came in, the volunteer would make comments on either how cute they looked or how good they smelled or the fact that they looked great in their shorts. Well, lo and behold, a lawsuit was served to the organization alleging that the male vendor was sexually harassed by the older woman. If they had not had third-party legal liability coverage on their EPL policy, they would have been on the hook for paying those defense costs, and that claim settled for around $50,000.
Okay, so that claim involved a vendor, a third-party vendor. So wouldn't a small business also have that exposure, or does that coverage only apply to nonprofits?
No, that example can apply to any business or nonprofit organization. Anybody who interacts with people, vendors or contractors for that matter, they could all have a potential big third-party EPL exposure. So I would say any business that has a public-facing operation, such as restaurants, retail stores, hotels, motels, bars, grocery stores, or even special events.
Isn't that covered under their GL policy?
Actually, most business think they have coverage for discrimination or sexual harassment on their GL or their BOP, but typically that is not true. Even an EPL that is added by endorsement to a GL policy typically will not extend to a third-party claim for discrimination or harassment.
So then what does the EPLI endorsement offer?
Well, most BOP endorsements will provide a low limit of EPL coverage, usually ranging from 25,000, maybe all the way up to a $500,000 limit, but it's more restrictive than a full monoline EPL policy.
Okay, so aside from possible price difference, are there any notable differences between adding an EPLI endorsement to a GL, a BOP, versus purchasing a monoline policy?
Sure, I can think of a few things that are different. First of all, the definition of an employee is often narrower on an endorsement. Sometimes it covers only current employees.
Man, that could really impact some businesses that have a different range of employee types. What else should I watch for?
Well, other things you should watch for does not include wage and hour violations, which is overtime pay issues, where most monoline policies will provide a sublimit of 100,000 to 250 for defense and or indemnity coverage. There's also differences in the definition of a wrongful act. It can be very limited and usually will not cover allegations such as retaliation, which is a very, very common allegation for EPL claims. Usually endorsements will not extend to third-party claims.
Any other benefits of a monoline policy versus an endorsement?
Well, I guess I would mention that EPL carriers also offer usually a broad risk management services that's free to policyholders as a resource. And that can really assist them or guide them on how to hire, how to fire employees, and provide templates on setting up an employment handbook. And then also a lot of times they offer free training classes to their employees on how not to harass or how to report if something happens.
Yeah, those are definitely great benefits. Definitely another reason agents should be offering monoline option for sure. But let's step back. Talking about comparing a monoline policy versus adding an EPLI endorsement, both have claims made trigger. Is that correct?
Michelle, that's a really good point you're making. Most EPL endorsements are written on a claims made trigger, but they're attached to an occurrence form, which can be very confusing to an insured to know when they need to report a claim to a carrier. And I would note that if the agent doesn't properly explain that reporting process, that could also lead to an agent E&O claim.
Why is that?
Well, having a claims made trigger means that the claim must be made during the policy period. So if there's an issue involving an employee during the current policy period, even if there's not a lawsuit filed, the insured must notify the carrier. EPL endorsements on a BOP or a GL policy, they require any known or possible incidents to be reported during the policy period, but no later than 30 to 60 days after that policy expires. So a late reporting of a claim could result in it being declined. But just to be clear, even a monoline EPL policy is offered on a claims made and reported basis, Michelle. So it's always very important for the agent to explain what a claims made trigger is and when the insured should report a claim.
So as we look at market conditions today, how would you say those conditions are for selling EPLI coverage?
It is absolutely a great time to be selling EPL to all your clients if they don't have it right now. We have seen a huge increase in businesses seeking EPL coverage, especially during COVID. However, during the pandemic, many insurance carriers pulled back and wouldn't offer coverage to first-time buyers due to the fear of more claims arising because of those business closures or layoffs. But now Most markets are open and looking for business and have few restrictions. So I hope agents out there will send us more submissions.
Thank you, Kim, for your time and for your input on EPLI. It's definitely appreciated. One of the great things about EPLI is most of our markets don't require a lot of information in order for us to get an indication. In fact, most of the information that we need is already likely on your client's application you're using for other coverages anyway. Insured's name, their address, the employee count, and the employee type. Are they full-time employees, part-time employees, independent contractors? What industry are they serving? And what are their gross sales or revenues over the last 12 months? There's a few ways you can get that information to us. First, you can access our agency portal, The Grove. Once you're logged into The Grove, you can access the application section and the EPLI application and have it completed and returned to our professional team. If you just want a quick indication and don't want to fill out a full application, we do have an online application that you can access via our website, or you can contact me or Kim directly and we can get that information from you and send that off to our markets for an indication. Thank you so much for joining us in our discussion today. EPLI continues to be a coverage that is needed by businesses regardless of their size, whether they have 2 employees, hundreds of employees, or they have no employees, such as a nonprofit, but have volunteers. We do hope that the information that we've provided is beneficial as you are working with your clients and discussing EPLI coverage options for them. As always, if you have any questions or need any additional information, do not hesitate to reach out to Kim or myself. And we look forward to hearing from you soon.